worst of all, it would open up the door for other states with less nuclear testing experience to begin to do so all over
Yes.
again. It could help them improve their capabilities. So this is a very troubling situation.
Donald Trump has conceded he's not seriously considering supplying Ukraine with long-range Tomahawk missiles. That is a setback for Ukraine. And there's also a great deal of confusion about whether America is going to go back into nuclear testing. Let's talk to Fabrice Pothier, the former director of NATO policy planning. Hello, Fabrice. Welcome back.
Good afternoon, John.
Good to have you here. So we seem to have President Trump and his energy secretary, as well as a key commander at the Pentagon, facing in completely different ways on whether or not America is going to resume nuclear testing. And that is a big, big thing, isn't it? It's got implications for a possible new arms race, as well as, complications and worries for the environment. What are your thoughts?
Well, first, I think we need to be clear here. We are indeed in a new nuclear age. And just, need to look at Russia and how Vladimir Putin has been using the nuclear threat to actually keep us from supporting or at least going too far in our support to Ukraine. Look at China, who is now entered the exclusive clubs of the plus 1,000 nuclear warheads.
Yes.
So I think there's a new nuclear age building up, and Donald Trump is, his usual realpolitik. Power politics, he's taking stock and suggesting to resume some form of underground testing.
Yeah, or undersea testing. But does that mean, Fabrice, that you somehow welcome this? Because it would be against the I know it's not ratified, but the nuclear test ban treaty and other agreements too. Would you not be concerned by that?
Well, I think the issue here, indeed, is that the U.S. is regarded as the standard bearer in trying to move away from a nuclear age, or at least trying to reduce the importance of nuclear weapons in global security. And if indeed the U.S. starts to blink and starts to change its posture and its approach and join in a way the clubs of those who are more willing to talk nuclear or to exercise nuclear, then indeed this is changing the picture. And this is where I think there's a real potential question mark here for also the other NATO European nuclear powers like the United Kingdom and France.
Okay, in a word, unless I misread you, you seem to be saying a nuclear arms race right now, or resume nuclear arms race, might actually be appropriate.
No, I'm just saying that we need to brush up our nuclear grammar because our adversaries like Russia and China are increasingly using it. But that doesn't necessarily mean we should proliferate and we should put nuclear weapons front and center of our defense policy. But and this is where the US, I think where the US is going is going to define NATO's nuclear strategy and NATO nuclear posture. So
yes.
There are important consequences for the rest of NATO, indeed.
All right, interesting thought. I'll be resuming that conversation a bit later on after 6 o'clock. And just briefly, Fabrice, it does now look as if President Trump has killed off any hope of him approving Tomahawk missiles for Ukraine. That is a setback, isn't it? Maybe not a surprise, but a setback.
Yeah, well, I think this is part of a Trump zigzagging on Ukraine, where you do see sometimes him taking some pretty hard stance against Russia, and then suddenly he will change, especially after a call with Vladimir Putin, and take a harder stance towards Ukraine or a softer one towards Russia. So unfortunately, the Tomahawk is part of this kind of zigzagging strategy toward vis-a-vis Ukraine. I think the Tomahawk were an important signal of the United States being willing to increase the cost of Russia's aggression war against Ukraine. And you could see that it has created some form of panic in Moscow, and Vladimir Putin took the phone and tried to do what a KGB man does, which is to turn your target in your favor. And he partly succeeded in Donald Trump putting the Tomahawk back on the back burner. However, I don't think the issue and the option is completely dismissed. I think the notion of giving the Ukrainians greater means means for deeper strikes, including with the United Kingdom, but also France and others, is actually something very much on the table, and that the Ukrainians are increasing their own capabilities. The Tomahawks have a known value because they are American weapons. They are the only weapons with the range and the precision of that kind. So obviously for the Russians, it had this kind of extra signaling. And this is why I think it would be wise by the US administration to bring back the Tomahawk at least on the table to kind of push the Kremlin to be more serious about peace negotiations.
Fabrice Potier, who's former director of NATO policy planning, thank you for joining me on
Thank you very much.
Now let's go back to the confusion, because there is definitely confusion about whether or not whether Donald Trump is committing America to go back to nuclear testing. It's denied by his cabinet colleague, the Energy Secretary Chris Wright, who would have to play a key role in any testing, and also contradicted by, among others, a senior officer, an admiral at the Pentagon, who's in charge of strategic command. So where are we now? Where's all this heading? Daryl Kimball is director of the Arms Control Association. Welcome to the program, Daryl.
Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. I mean, what do you make of this obvious confusion? President Trump saying he will see nuclear testing resumed by America. Then you've got a key cabinet minister, an senior officer at the Pentagon, and others, some of those responsible for the nuclear stockpile of the United States, saying there's no need for it. What do you make of what you're hearing?
Well, look, I've been working in this field for 35 years, and it is very disconcerting to see the President of the United States not on the same page with senior cabinet officials about the important details of nuclear policy matters. From President Trump's statements on social media beginning last week and on 60 Minutes, the CBS News program that was recorded Friday, he clearly is a bit misinformed or confused or both about what kinds of tests he thinks other nuclear countries are doing. And he has not been clear about what kinds of nuclear tests he wants the United States to be pursuing. We got to remember that the United States conducted the first nuclear test explosion in 1945. The last one was on September 23rd, 1992. A total of about 1,030 nuclear test explosions, more than all the other nuclear armed states combined. So the U.S. has a long history and a lot of information about how our nuclear warheads are designed, how they operate. We've been pursuing a program of stockpile stewardship, very expensive, $20 billion a year right now, to maintain the existing arsenal without nuclear explosive testing. And we do know more today about the arsenal than we did at any other time. But what Trump is saying is not that there's a problem in the U.S. arsenal that requires nuclear explosive testing all over again, but that other countries are doing it. And he falsely suggested in the 60 Minutes interview that Russia, China, Pakistan, North Korea are currently conducting nuclear test explosions. That is not true. There are allegations that surfaced in 2019 that Russia may have been engaged in extremely low yield experiments involving nuclear material that may have produced a release of self-sustaining nuclear energy. Those have not been confirmed. The administration has not provided data. So the administration has got to explain what the allegations of other countries' nuclear testing are, what the United States, what Trump believes the United States needs to do that we're not already doing to maintain our arsenal. And if the president is intending to resume nuclear explosive testing for the first time for the United States in 33 years, it would violate the 1996 Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which the U.S. has signed, and 186 other countries. And worst of all, it would open up the door for other states with less nuclear testing experience to begin to do so all over again. It helped them improve their capabilities. So this is a very troubling situation that is really hard to fathom, but that is where we are.
Yeah, I mean, it could in a nutshell. It could kick off a new nuclear arms race. Now, our listener, Andrea, writes in, stop speculating, she says, no one, not even Trump himself, knows what he means. It would be better if we ignored him. That's Andrea's view. Daryl, trouble is, the president is the commander-in-chief and does have the last word on these things. And from another angle, it's quite worrying if the man with the nuclear codes doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, it would be nice sometimes to ignore leaders who make silly or false statements, but in this case, we can't. And he is the commander-in-chief, as you say. So it is the responsibility of the president and the people around him to clarify before this causes more damage, more concern. I must say, in the last 6 days since this social media post, we've had governments contacting us. We're a non-governmental organization. I've been working on this particular topic for 35 years for answers. And I can't deliver those answers given what is coming out of the White House communications office and other parts of the Trump administration. So one thing I would just also note is that it is very important for the many governments, including the UK government, to communicate now at a high level their deep concern that the United States is contemplating a resumption of nuclear test explosions, to ask for immediate clarification from the Secretary of State, from the White House. That kind of pressure is important to communicate that the world believes that nuclear testing it should end. It should never take place again. And so other countries have a role here. This is not just a U.S. domestic governmental issue.
All right, Daryl Kimball, Director of the Arms Control Association, thank you.